Hey, what's up? Joey here from Jungle Brothers Podcast. Welcome to the show. Today, I'm talking with Lucas Aaron of Range of Strength. Lucas is building a pretty hefty sized community, mostly through social media. You can see him at Instagram, of people who are trying to get stronger and more mobile. And as you'll hear, his philosophy, very much like ours, is all about the combination of strength training and flexibility training. And as he sees it, they are one and the same. Really cool chat, a lot of good takeaways. Very interesting to hear his journey going from a powerlifting background, having an accident in the gym, and how that became the catalyst for him to go and do what he's now doing. I won't go into it any further. You're going to love the chat. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to connecting with him further down the track. Please enjoy today's episode with Lucas Aaron from Range of Strength. My man. Mate, thank you for joining me. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's cool to connect. You know, I think we have a lot of connections around us, and we've never really connected much ourselves. Like, I can't think of his name right now. Ghetto owns Ghetto.
Will Grant.
Will, right? Yeah, he referred me to you a while back, so jumped on, kind of see what you're all about. Like he said, you're like one of his go-to guys, and then seeing you worked with Emmett in the past, and I think it's cool to actually connect and get on for a chat.
Mate, absolutely. Yeah, Will's a longtime friend. I'm actually going to go down to his gym tomorrow morning, do a bit of training and catch up. And you probably know what it's like for gym owners and stuff. You don't actually get to hang out as much as you'd like to because you're so busy working. But I was surprised when I saw you were collaborating with Emmett a little while back, and I was like, oh wow, I didn't know Range of Strength and Emmett were like, I didn't know you guys knew each other. But then it became clear to me because I've followed your stuff for ages, and I was immediately like, of course, man, like cut from the same cloth, very similar philosophies, similar approaches. And I don't know, I guess there's this idea that you're in some other part of the world. You're in Nova Scotia, right?
Yeah.
Emmett's in Dublin, both extremely cold. But of course, the internet is such a small place now. It makes for us movement practitioners, mobility practitioners, it's so easy for us to connect through Instagram and stuff. So yeah, of course, we're all part of this one little community.
Yeah, it's cool, man. So you're in Australia?
I am. Yeah, I'm in Sydney. I'm in my garage right now, which is the at-home podcast studio when I don't want my 1-year-old to kick the door down.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Feel that.
Yeah, bro. We usually record out of the gym, which is Jungle Brothers, and we're down in like the south part of the city, which is 40 minutes from here.
Yeah.
But where possible, if I'm just doing a solo show like today, I'll do it from home. It's kind of cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have as much space freedom at home lately these days, so I've been sneaking into the bedroom for these podcasts.
Mate,
the house is in turmoil.
What's your deal? Do you live with a partner? Do you live with flatmates? Like, what's your home situation like?
Yeah, I'm married now for, over 10 years. We have 3 kids. I have a 12-year-old and the twins are 10. So yeah, full on family life outside of all the social media stuff you see. And that's just full on, man. That's the balance between, staying up with all that stuff. My older guy, he just got into working out. So he asked me 3 times already, are we working out today? Because I'm showing him stuff and he's super keen to do it right, which is cool. But it's just a different phase of that parenthood kind of family life. But that's my jam. Mate,
that's beautiful. I had no idea you have kids, and I guess we all use social media for different things, and I suppose for you it's your business and it's your training.
Yeah.
Is there an effort? Do you try not to get the family involved, say with Instagram? Like, is that something you'd like to keep separate?
I have in recent years. In the past, I had that heavily involved in my account, and as it's kind of grown and gotten to a certain point where it's become, maybe my message delivery has changed in a point where it's kind of like, I don't know, the kids are getting older and it's just not the same. Like, they don't really want to be a part of that, and my wife doesn't want to be a part of that, and so it's kind of my own thing now. But when they were younger, I used to share a lot more of their stuff. Like we used to go outside and play on the rings, and you know, yeah, they just don't now. They're kind of like, no, I don't really want to, do that kind of stuff. Dad, don't post that. I always say that, don't post that, Dad. Don't post that. Right. So
Yeah, it's funny.
yeah.
I find myself pondering that with my 1-year-old. Obviously he's got no fucking idea, right? And so I'm thinking, oh man, this is super cute. I want to, and I like to, and I'm sure you felt the same at that time, where you like to tell that story. You like to show people, hey, I got other commitments outside of my training, and this is how I balance it, and this is the characters in my story, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But there's always that feeling I have where is there something unethical about it? Like, is my son one day going to say, hey, man, I didn't give you permission to put that photo of me eating a chicken drumstick or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting kind of conundrum that our generation has found itself in, because we were the first people to kind of catch hold of this social media thing, weren't we?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, they're into that like more than anything now. We've held off to the point where we can't anymore, but my 12-year-old has a cell phone now. But yeah, like all the kids in those circles, like 10 years old and 9-year olds, like have cell phones at school. It's like, what? It's crazy, man. Like I was like 18 when I got my first cell phone. Like wild. It's just crazy. But yeah. And because of that, they're like, the social media side of things, they connect like, and with COVID and stuff too, right? They're connecting with their friends online, all the shutdowns we've had and everything. So everything's online, but yeah, they're really particular about what I share now. And they've kind of seen me like kind of grow in recent years, like my social medias and stuff. And so they're always like, don't put that on there.
Mate, times are changing fast, huh?
Yeah, man.
So,
Yeah.
brother, tell me, there's a really interesting piece there, and interesting that you mentioned Will from Ghetto, because Will is, we were once counterparts in the training thing. Like, it was both of us were just young dudes, gym owners. We could put all the time we wanted into our training, and arguably, we put way more time into our training than many other things in life.
Yeah.
Will, from what I can tell, seems to still kind of ride that wave a little bit. I'm much less concerned. Like, I'm much less into it these days. I train, a much more balanced amount, and it's just, based on whatever I'm into.
Yeah.
But Will's got 3 kids, and I'm always looking at him. I told him the other day, I'm like, he's a little bit of a dad inspo for me, because I'm like, man, you got 3 kids, you got a business, you got staff, and you got all this training and, other stuff you want to do. And it sounds like you're kind of riding a similar wave in a sense, at least from, what I'm picking up. Talk to me about what that transition was like for you, where maybe you went from not having the commitments of family to now having that to a, quite a degree.
Well, our when my wife was pregnant with our first, that was kind of I don't know, maybe like it wasn't that I wasn't like, I guess, pushing myself and striving to like, do more of what I wanted. But really, when we found out we were expecting our first child, that was when I felt like a lot of maybe immaturities or like bullshit that I was carrying just kind of like disappeared. And I was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. And this is what I want to do. And those inspirations started to arise from like, I want to inspire my child to know that I like followed my dreams and did the things that I loved doing. That was, I kind of have grown up that way, where it's like, I don't want to, go get a 9 to 5 and live that way because that's just expected and that's just what you do, which is maybe the setting that I grew up in, kind of like small class family. And it was just like, go get a job and shut your mouth. So, yeah, I feel like at that point when we found out we were having our first child was when I was like, I'm going to go hard. I'm going to go hard and really follow these goals and these aspirations I have, and in doing so, inspire my kids to do the same. So, I mean, that wasn't like you know, a straight path or anything. There's obviously an uphill battle to that. And, you know, finding social media, like you were saying earlier, like we were a part of that time when Instagram kind of started becoming a thing. And, yeah, just that kind of grew and to develop into what it was. And I found this outlet where I've now been able to do that in a way that is accommodating with the family. Um, but yeah, I think that was like when I reflect back, like that moment I found out we were having our first child, that was when everything just kind of like clicked, you know, because I mean, I don't know about you, but like I grew up with friends that knew what they wanted to do, like since we were in junior high, or you know, like they just always knew they were going to do this, and they're doing that now. And I was like trying stuff, and I loved training and sports and stuff, and but I never really had that clear, like, this is what I'm going to do. And, you know, I feel like that was like a turning point where I knew, okay, I'm going to get into this field of work and I'm going to go hard. And this is what I like doing. Like, you know, you kind of make those decisions when those things are kind of put upon you, I guess, or there was for me.
So you're saying that your friends, most of your mates kind of knew what they wanted to do, had that sort of clarity, whereas you were a bit less certain about it?
Yeah, for sure. I bounced around a lot of different things, man. Like I went to business school for a bit, like studied marketing.
Right
So,
on.
you know, I didn't really know what I wanted to do there, but I was, you know, taking some education, and then I went, what else was I doing? Psychology for a bit. Like, and I don't even know why I was going to the school. Like I was kind of just keeping up with my mates. Like they were going to school and I was just, you know, bouncing around trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And then I started working in a gym. And that was like, I was working in a gym because I was like out there all the time anyway. I was always training, and got really passionate about that for myself. And then it kind of just made sense. I was like, well, I'm here all the time. I could take some courses and just start making some money hanging out here. And that's kind of how that all started. It was more, you know, doing it for myself. Like I just loved being in the gym and training, and, you know, found some part-time work that way while I was doing school and trying to figure that stuff out. But yeah, it was a little different for me, I guess, than everyone that knew what they wanted to do.
That resonates with me a lot. I feel like the majority of my friends didn't know what they wanted to do either. We were all kind of cruising, and I think back to friends who did have that clarity. You know, the ones who went on to become lawyers or nurses or, you know, medical practitioners, like, and they had that sort of direction from the beginning. I feel like that was definitely the minority in you know, within my kind of social network. Um, it's funny, I ponder that often, and I do feel like, I mean, I feel like there's a great privilege that comes with that, because if you don't have to choose, then obviously things are going pretty good, because there's no, you know, you don't have the squeeze on you to, you know, to go, no, I have to go and get 2 degrees so that I can get a job as a computer developer and, you know, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I love looking back in the way that you did it, like all the different things I've done in the past. And then you're like, it could have so easily worked out that I didn't end up where I am.
Yeah.
Like nothing was, you know, there was so many different opportunities, and like you said, different jobs, and maybe you chose to go down one of those avenues, and you could have been a marketing guy. Well, arguably you still are a marketing guy, but you know,
Yeah.
could have been a more corporate approach perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, man. And, well, I remember it wasn't even as clear as like when we found out we were expecting our first, that I was like, oh, I'm going to be a coach. Cause there was some panic there too. Cause, like, I don't know what it's like over there with you, but out here in Canada, the oil rigs is out west. So that's kind of like where I'm in the East Coast, very small. That feeling of like, I'm going to go out west to make some cash, you know, and go on the rigs. That's a common thing too, where it's, you know, if something comes up and you're like, oh shit, I gotta, you know, I'm going to go make some. So that was actually, that could have been certainly the scenario as well too. Cause I was thinking about that. I said to my wife, you know, like I'll go out to the rigs, I'll make some money, and we'll get things set up, and then we'll figure things out. And she was actually the one who got like, I really lucked in with her, man, because she pulled things in. Was like, no, we're gonna be all right. Like, you finish your schooling, because at the time I was studying exercise science in college. So I was kind of finding that niche of what I wanted to do, but I was going to abandon it, and I was going to, oh, frig, we're having a kid and all that stuff, right? But she held on strong, and told me finish. We'll be all right, and yeah, it all worked out in the end, or it's still working out, kind of thing, right? Like, yeah,
Mate, that's beautiful.
yeah,
Yeah, we do have a similar thing with the mines here. Coal, I actually don't know what they mine. They mine coal, but they mine every a bunch of different minerals over in Western Australia. So same kind of idea. We're on the
yeah,
east, over in the west. If you go to Western Australia, it's extremely like there's heaps of young guys that are super cashed up because mining is easy to access for them. Um, Occasionally you meet a guy here in the east that and women too, but it is predominantly a male thing. But they will, sort of, what do? They fly in and fly out. Do the rigs work similar? Like you go in, work real hard for a couple of weeks, and then come
yeah,
home for a week, kind of vibe.
yeah, exact same. Yeah, they go to a camp, and
Yeah.
they come back, and I contemplated that off and on a few times when I was trying to figure things out, and it was just the few friends I had that did that, you know, it wasn't, they weren't the same after a while, like going out there on a camp, and you're working super hard, and you're coming back home and you got cash and stuff, but it's just a distant thing. It wasn't my vibe. Like, never in it for the money per se. Like, that was never my motivation. Was never like, I got to make as much money as possible and then stop doing things that I like doing. Like, it's always been like, find something you like or love and make money doing it, and you never work a day in your life. Like, I've always liked that kind of approach to things. So that, I guess, wasn't appealing to me, to go there and kind of slave away and come back, and what are you doing with the money at that point? Because you're working so hard, and then you want to decompress, so then you're kind of blowing your money on the frivolous things that don't matter, right? Like,
Hookers and drugs.
yep. So yeah, I think I dodged a bullet with that approach, but definitely, things happen in life sometimes, and I think some of my friends went that route because a certain scenario came upon them, and they were like, I gotta make some cash, and then you kind of get stuck in that thing, right? And that's just the thing that you're doing, and that's what and that's when it's hard to make that decision. Like, I don't like this, and I want to actually find what it is that I am passionate about and what I love doing. And I think there's a lot of people that live like that, and like, I feel like I strive to not live like that. Like, I don't want to find myself, I don't want my kids to find themselves in a scenario where they get stuck and they're not finding passion in life and what they're doing. So that's kind of my source of inspiration, I think, at the end.
So how did you take it from exercise science, working in a gym, connecting those dots, like, what, I could do this, I could make a bit of money from this. What was the timeline and the journey like from there to say where you are now, where you have an established online fitness business that I'm guessing is your main source of income and your full-time gig? Talk to me about what that journey was like in between.
Well, that's maybe like a year and a half or almost 2 years now. It's approaching that it's my full-time gig. So that's, I think, important to have, that context, because I graduated in like 2010. So I've been going hard with trying to make that, my sole income since that point, which requires you to go get more work and more experience, and kind of figure things out, which is, I think, a lot of new fresh coaches not all of them think that way, right? Like, I'm gonna get out and I'm gonna start something up and I'm gonna have it all figured out. It's like, no, man, it's gonna take some time and figure it out, and what works, and experience working with people and that sort of thing. But when I do think back, I was always striving for online work because it just made the most sense to me. So like back then, I remember blogging was more of a thing. So I had a blog at the time. So I was posting training in my blog and just sharing my workouts. And there was some community around that kind of building up. So working that way. And then whatever clients I was working with in the gym, I was always trying to give them stuff online and kind of push in that direction. I saw a benefit in that. Also within myself, the ability to take more clients. Like, if I can free this person up online a little bit more, then I can maybe find some more one-to-one work. So yeah, from the start, I was always striving for that online kind of structure. And I don't really remember where that came from. I think I was just maybe working with other coaches because I was powerlifting competitively. That was like my sport of choice. And some of the coaches I was working with, it was like, you're paying them whatever it was at the time, maybe $500 for a block of training, and you're getting like a spreadsheet, right? And then my interaction with them was pretty minimal. And I was kind of like, man, that's a good gig for like what they're doing, sending me a spreadsheet. And I'm doing one-to-one PT for, an hour and a half. And so I always saw the benefit in like, oh, getting into online work. It's like you can get that extra income you're looking for and have a little bit more balance. So yeah, man, from the start, pushing the online kind of journey and everything. I did get to a point where I was pretty busy part-time online as a powerlifting coach. And then that's when my injury happened and the whole identity like switched. And then it was like, who am I? What do I want to be as a coach in the fitness industry? And that was when I kind of segued into like Instagram and sharing a different journey. And that different journey was like my own journey, kind of coming back out of injury and finding flexibility and that sort of stuff. And then that segued into Range of Strength, like what it is now. And I think at that time when I was sharing that journey of transformation and kind of all of those things, I didn't know that that was going to be where I was going. I just knew that I had to share that because I had kind of felt like I lost my identity as a power lifter and I, lost a lot of things. And I was like, I'm going to start sharing this different journey and kind of search for that community that I kind of had previous to. And yeah, it did. I did connect with a lot of people that I'm still connected with now at that time. And yeah, it's kind of all led to where we are now.
Tell me about the injury.
So it was a bicep rupture, which it's kind of a funny injury to talk about because it like doesn't really sound as crazy as like, breaking your femur or anything. But when you're powerlifting competitively, I had gotten myself to a certain weight category, a certain shape, body type, ability to do certain things. When the bicep goes, I wasn't able to do any of it. Couldn't deadlift, couldn't bench. Squatting was, subjective to the safety squat bar. And at that time, it was like the realization of the shape I had gotten myself in. Right. And it's like, okay, I have a kid. We had one kid at the time. What do I want for the long-term goals in my life? And that was, I wanted to move better. I wanted to get myself in better shape. It wasn't really flexibility at the start. Like it wasn't like the first thing that came to my mind was like, I need to be more flexible. It's like, I need to move better and get myself in better shape. So that's when body composition, I started to make a switch there. And I started finding body weight training, gymnastics training, as I really connected with that and appealed to that and went hard into the flexibility. So yeah, the bicep injury it was a longer recovery than you would think. I had an endo button procedure done. So it's when they kind of shave a bowl in the radius bone and then they pull the tendon down and attach it to a plate, a little steel plate and it has to grow over like all that stuff. So it was a little longer of a recovery, but for the better. It's supposed to be a stronger repair. So that was tough, man. Like trying to figure out how to just like put pressure on my hand again. And I think too, it didn't help. Like I have seen other guys rupture their biceps that were in like good shape and have had like really good capabilities prior to have like a really strong recovery. And I did have a strong recovery eventually, but like for me, it was that like the shape I was in and the abilities that I had, like I couldn't even straighten my elbows. And I was that guy. Like, I don't know if you've seen that guy that's like, no, I can't straighten my elbows, man. Like it's never going to happen. I can't straighten my elbows.
Oh yeah. Even when they're hanging from a bar, it's like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I was that guy. So like, and then I ruptured my bicep. I was like, oh, man, I'm never going to straighten my elbows. So, it was definitely an uphill battle to then find gymnastics, strength training, and all of these things that I had never gone hard into before, and start studying straight arm strength and make these connections like, oh, there's like other ways that you can approach training. And I was very much more of like your kind of typical S&C powerlifting type coach prior to. So that was like a big growth opportunity for me when I got injured. It was like, I'm going to go study all these things I know nothing about. And that maybe I turned a blind eye to prior to, but now I don't really have any other option. Doctors tell me I'll never deadlift again. No, you'll never deadlift again. What do you mean? So you have to start.
On that, were you like, no, I'll deadlift again? Like, or were you, okay, so you were kind of determined to surpass this thing.
Yeah, very determined to just look where I hadn't looked before. And, hook grip is obviously a thing I knew of. So I was like, oh, I can hook grip. But beyond that.
We're talking less pressure through the bicep tendon when hook gripping?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, yeah, I never really put those two together, but that makes sense.
Yeah, and that was like, I actually started deadlifting a lot sooner because of that. Like I started using hook grip. And there was a little, like a period there where I was like, I'm going to go back to powerlifting. Like, and I had that talk with my wife, right? Like, she's like, you're an idiot. And I'm like, I was just being a meathead about it. Like, I'm going to go back. I'm going to, have a comeback. And like, she was, putting things into perspective. And yeah, as the recovery process went on, I was like, fuck, I'm a piece of shit. So yeah, like that was an interesting time, man. That was definitely an interesting time in my life. Like when you feel really vulnerable like that, especially when you've been in like that, community and setting and kind of built yourself up to be, strong and kind of bulletproof, whatever that means. Right. Yeah, it was really, it was a wake up call for sure.
Mate, that's a real fascinating little sort of snippet there. We talk about it a lot, this idea of the specialist becoming really good at something, but moving away from a lot of other things or sacrificing a lot of other capacities in order to become excellent at that one thing. And powerlifters always are a great example in my mind, where they are just so incredibly strong at those specific movements. And, I've got a jiu-jitsu background. If you bring a powerlifter into their first jiu-jitsu class, if they get their hands on you, like you're going to get fucked up. They're going to be able to ragdoll you at the very least. However, they just lack the ability to move in positions that are not linear or straight up and down.
Yeah.
And we've had over the years a lot of powerlifters come to the gym, Jungle Brothers, and they're like, I want more of this. I don't know what it is that I want, but I see what's going on and I want to be a part of it. And this journey that they have to go through, especially like if they're quite advanced with their lifting in there and they've built a lot of mass around it and a lot of tension, it's such a hard path to go down. I think that, to paint the picture very clearly for folks, it's a hard path to go down because you got to do a fuckload of work in order to open the body up and bring in this range of movement, don't you?
Yeah. You got to put faith in that too, right? And you got to believe, if you're my coach and you're telling me, yes, in a year or 2 years, you can move really good. It's like, fuck, that's a long time, man. And like, you got to put the work in and you got to see day in, day out, no progress, and you got to keep going. Whereas in powerlifting, you run a 12-week training block, you made all these gains, right? Oh, I made all these gains. I got so strong and put mass on and movement, flexibility. That is tough, man. That's a tough game. That's going to take a long time.
I find that often that message will get through, but for an individual, whether it's a conscious decision of theirs or not, they will often turn their back on that process. They'll be like, you know what? I don't want it bad enough that I'm going to take the piece that you said, that I'm going to sort of change my identity. Because often this is happening at, I don't know, early 30s, maybe late 30s, somewhere around there, where you're like, I've invested over a decade of my life into this sport and I really love it and it forms a basis of who I am. You're now telling me that I can change, but it means inverting this whole sort of picture of myself that the world has. And, you know, without criticizing it, for a lot of people, they don't see that as worth it. Like, I can't be fucked I'm just going to either continue on being an injured powerlifter or injured specialist, whatever, or I'm just not going to train anymore.
Yeah.
Can you talk on that transition and choosing to take the path where you're like, all right, I've got to go and become a beginner now at this thing, and like you said, it's going to be 1 or 2 years before I'm, you know, competent at moving.
Yeah, for sure, man. And the hardest part was leaving the community that I was really grown attached to, right? Because I always talk about community. It's like, it's really why we do a lot of this stuff, man. Like, you get a community, you meet people that share the same interests, and it's exciting, right? Like training. It was Arthur Saxon in one of his early books. He talks about training alone versus like training with someone or to show someone something. And he like words it really well. Like, I can't think of it off the top of my head right now, but like, yeah, community and like thriving around others that are like working towards similar goals. And powerlifting is really built on community. Like, yeah, you're getting strong and it's an individual sport, but you're always doing it with like a group of people that you get really close with. So that's definitely part of it too, right? Is you tie into these friendships, and now you don't necessarily feel like that resonates with you in the same way, but you don't want to lose those friendships. That was a really challenging time for me. So I did disconnect from that completely, because that's the only way to do it. It's like trying to stay friends with an ex, right? Like, this ain't working. Why are we trying to do this? So we just disconnect right away, right? You can maybe talk again in 5 or 10 years and everything's cool. Which, that being said, I have reconnected with powerlifting community that I used to be quite attached to. And the gym I train at now, I used to do powerlifting workshops there like 10 years ago or so. So I've kind of been able to bring myself back into these settings, and it's with a different lens where they actually are kind of interested in what I've done. Right now, it's like, whoa, you actually went and did this stuff and you're moving better. Can you help me a little bit? Maybe not to the extent that I went on, but like they want to keep powerlifting, right? And that wasn't necessarily in my cards, but that was definitely the hardest part.
I got to ask, are you familiar with Joseph Campbell's work?
No, I'm not.
He came up with this model of the hero's journey, which is the narrative that all great stories follow. But what you've detailed there just exemplifies the hero's journey to a T. This idea of you're living your life, you encounter an obstacle. Yep. At first, you're not sure if you can make it, but you meet the mentors and you get the help you need. You meet the Yoda, and then or the Obi-Wan Kenobi rather, and then you go on this journey of development to finally circle back around to come back to your people, which are the powerlifters amongst others, to teach them what you've learned. It's just funny. Have a look at it when we hop off, because you'd be like, that's kind of funny. But yeah, when you said like, now I'm reconnecting and I'm showing them, you know, what I've learned. I mean, that's fucking amazing. Please continue. Don't let me cut you off again.
Yeah, that's cool. A cool way to think about it for sure. And that's, I think when we are, brought to that moment where we have to make those decisions, that's the hardest decision for people to make, is like leaving that people, the community, leaving these things that you were so attached to, because that's really what you're attached to. You maybe aren't as attached to, you know, the movement freedom aspect of it, but rather, because even like you said, you look in the specialist in other areas, they're getting just as banged up. Like gymnastics is awesome, but competitive gymnasts, when you talk to them when they're older, they're pretty banged up, man. So that's not the lifestyle they're probably going to take forever. They'll always have a part of that of them in their lives, but um, it kind of goes in all of those specialized routes where you kind of get yourself, and I deal with, and that's because I also deal with those people, like the clients and other students that mentor with me. Like they've come from some specialized background where they want to find that freedom to move and that flexibility and that kind of stuff. But it's the same thing. The hardest part is detaching themselves from that thing for a little while, right? Because that's going to be a distraction. And even still dealing with that, when people come to me and want to improve their flexibility, they're not always bought in, right? Like, I just want to try this for a month and see if I like it. Okay, that's cool. You can you can do that. I'm going to lay it out for you and say that this is the commitment that's needed, and integrating other things. We can do that, but this should be the priority if this is what your goal really is. But yeah, that's always the hardest part for people. So that's what it was for me, man. It's like detaching myself from that, trying to find that new identity and kind of go to these, like, and I was doing that by myself. I was going to yoga classes, and I went to a few circus classes. There's a circus school out where I'm at. Like I was going to these weird places by myself because no one else would go with me. So I was putting myself into those environments, and that was really intimidating. But trying to connect the pieces was always, kind of had my coach's hat on. Like, okay, why are you doing that? And why are we doing this? And trying to kind of bridge the gap there.
Who were some of your biggest influences at around that time?
Well, first it came from local people. So there was this one guy. I don't know if he's still doing it, but he was like the calisthenics guy, Joey. Joey Lavoie
Good man.
was his name. Yeah. And he had that like gymnast look too, right? He was like shorter, huge upper body, but I just connected with what he was doing, body weight stuff. I was like, I gotta just talk to him, see what he kind of shares with me. So he started sharing Overcoming Gravity. It was kind of like the first resource kind of book I had gotten at that time, where it was like body weight focus. Have you read that book?
I haven't. I know of it.
Yeah, it's a really good training reference. Like it lays out the skills and the progressions and programming, which I was always obsessed with programming side of things. And so I got into that. I started doing some body weight stuff, and then I found Coach Summers, Gymnastic Bodies.
Yeah,
so I found his work, and that was at the time when it was like really fresh. So if you connected with that stuff, it was like Jefferson Curl, like all this stuff, loaded mobility work. Yeah, just like what is this crazy stuff?
You can't do that. Yeah.
So I got into that and really connected with. He called it the weighted mobility work, because it was my jam, strength training and finding ways to improve your flexibility. And that led to Kit Lachlan. So Kit had done the Gymnastic Bodies Stretch series, like he was a part of that development. And yeah,
I wasn't aware that he had contributed to Gymnastic Bodies work back then.
Yeah, him and Coach Summer were working together for a while, and it was mainly he came in as the source for bringing flexibility to all his systems. So if you remember, he had like the Stretch series stuff with the Gymnastic Bodies. So Kit was involved in organizing that. You can kind of tell that he left because that stretch series stuff kind of halted. Didn't have much detail to it. It's like, here's some stretches. And you're like, okay, but like what, how, why, right? So finding Kit was a breakthrough at that time because he's the GOAT, man. Like he's been teaching adult flexibility like his whole life. And on himself, like it all started with him. Like I really connected with his story and obviously all the work he's done. But really trying to pinpoint and find out how adult flexibility works. It's like, I started also seeing that as like a thing that I could get into. It's like, if I'm not going to be a powerlifting coach anymore, what kind of coach am I going to be? And you see how you can adult flexibility, like how many people can you help with that? Right. So getting into Kit's work for a few years there, and then finding Emmett through Kit's work and getting into Emmett's work, which like Emmett's work, he puts so much free stuff out as well. Like you can binge his stuff on YouTube and, like that. I took the head to toe journey at that time. That was like the big Emmett's chalkboard, his blackboard kind of series was going on. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
The ones with the terrible audio.
Yeah. You got the best videos. So that, I mean, getting into Emmett's work was cool because Emmett really presented the strength side of flexibility. And that was when things like really started to connect. It's like, Kit's presentation is like kind of the softer side. And then you kind of get into Emmett's work and you see like it's the harder side kind of brought together, like how those two things kind of merge. And yeah, man, like that was like around that time was when I started going hard into splits and back bends. And like, I just started really buying into flexibility. Like I was doing the gymnastics strength training stuff, but not to the degree where I thought I was going to do a planche. Like, I don't know if you see my body type either. Like I'm not really built for that stuff. Like I progressed pretty far with it, got in good shape with it, but like I connected with the flexibility work. Like it really, it just pulled me in, man. Like I was like, I got to do this. I got to go all in here, figure this stuff out, and then kind of come out and try to, see how all the dots connect after that. Cause you go on those journeys where you already have an experience. Like I was a power lifter and now I'm like diving crazy hard into flexibility. And then back in my mind is like, what's that going to look like when I come out? Like
the combination.
Like what's that going to look like when I understand how flexibility and powerlifting have connections? It's like, that was always what I was after. It's like, I want to come out of here and like know how to kind of merge these two things. And I, maybe not quite there yet, definitely more closer to that than ever, but that's a deep journey you got to take for yourself. And yeah.
During that time, were you maintaining strength through your powerlifting, or did you pretty much just put all that on ice?
I was trying to for a while, and I probably, knowing what I know now, I probably could have hung on to that. But I had to just go all in, man. Like I kind of got to a point where I was like, I just got to go all in on this and like see what happens, knowing that I'll always be able to come back. So yeah, it was like a couple of years I wasn't really lifting much at all. And then the funny thing is I didn't lose much strength in terms of like where my body comp had gotten to. I wouldn't say that it took me long to build back up. And if anything, I was just in better positions. I was better capable to move and squat. And, it was, everything kind of just felt easier.
So at what point did you, and I guess this is jumping forward to range of strength. At what point did you sort of merge those two ideas together, like the building flexibility, but then also building strength, which, as we know, is kind of what the bedrock of mobility is. But the way you do it, I would argue, is quite unique. You do a lot of barbell lifts. I see you doing a lot of kind of the old time strongman sort of lifts as well. I see some Zercher stuff in there. So there's like this love of strength, but also it's it's not at the expense of range, which, is pretty much summed up in your name, Range of Strength. Talk to me about when that, when you sort of came to be pushing both of those, either in your own training or in the business.
So I found Keegan Smith in when was that? 2020, 2019. So we started connecting, and I connected with the Real Movement at the time. It was when I started getting into that stuff, and he was like trying to do that. He was like, I need a flexibility guy to kind of help me with the strength side, because it was still a little bit more separated with like what he was doing with Real Movement, some barbell traditional strength stuff. And we had connected and did a podcast together. It was like my second or third podcast with the Range of Strength podcast. And like we connected on a different level where we kind of knew what we both were looking for. Like he was looking for that blend and I was looking for that blend. And that was kind of when we were able to come together and kind of really experiment with merging these two worlds and what that looked like. So I put out, at the time when the Real Movement platform was out for coaches, I put out a practical guide to splits. So that was like the first opportunity for Range of Strength to be something that was presented in that way. And it was called Range of Strength. So Range of Strength's practical guide to splits was what we called it. And it was basically front side splits, pancake, but showcasing how you can do it with strength training. So you go back, and on the platform I have now, I still have that 2019 presentation of it. And then I have like the updated one where it's like, then a couple of years into it, I was, doing all these other different things. And this is what I feel is a better optimal approach now for training splits through strength. And obviously I think the thing there is we're all looking for that ability to merge it into our practice. It's like, how can I do this where I'm doing some other things, kind of generalist approach. So that's kind of how things have updated that way. But yeah, that was how things unfolded. And then that turned into a Range of Strength certification when we were doing the certifications through Real Movement. And I did some teacher training. So kind of bringing coaches in that just knew, basically sharing the journey I went on is what it was. It's like, here's adult flexibility and like some flexibility stuff that you need to know in the background and that education piece. But it was always about the practical side of the training, and the teacher approach was like, you got to do this stuff. Like, we got to get into the program. We got to stretch. We got to learn these moves and like understand them. And I think that's where we as coaches grow the most, is through when we actually start applying the knowledge, right? And that's where flexibility is lacking. It's really growing now, and there's a lot of coaches that are like getting that flexibility education, but really aren't getting their hands dirty still. It's like, we got to get in there and understand how it works on our own bodies, so we can understand how it works with other bodies and things like that. So that was kind of the big component to the teacher training I was doing, was trying to give coaches that practical hands-on experience online, which was a bit hard to do. But yeah, that's how things kind of shaped and evolved to where now my membership's kind of like a presentation of all the programming systems, but then there's the educational side to it too, where you can go through all those webinars and, have access to those things that I did in the past and the upgrades I've been putting on them ever since. So yeah, that's where we are now.
Mate, amazing. I remember meeting Keegan years ago at an Ido Portal workshop in Sydney, and we'd had a lot of mutual friends over the years. And I mean, that guy's bounced around the fitness industry, so many different corners of it, and he's been, for better or for worse, he's had an impact. Seems to be he's aligned himself with a lot of incredible coaches. So it doesn't surprise me that a large part of your sort of development in recent years was, whatever, there was a part where you were involved in that. I remember when I had a knee surgery a couple of years ago, and I, had an ACL reconstruction, and I was looking for some strength training to get back on track, and I wanted to check out the Knees Over Toes guy, and I signed up to his program. This is some years ago, and I remember seeing your stuff there as well, and it was like, I think it was the Athletic Truth group, and it was like, there was 4 or 5 different things, and I didn't really look at the other things, but I was like, oh, that's cool. There's like these other little journeys that I can follow here. Talk to me about that. What was the relationship there, and are you still part of a collective, or are you now your own entity?
Yeah, I'm my own entity now, and the merger there with Real Movement and ATG at the time was to bring coach, like it was about trying to bring Real Movement into like a dual subscription. So it's kind of like if you subscribe as a Real Movement coach, you get access to the ATG platform and all these training concepts and programs and ideas. And when that was something that we were working on, Jeffrey Wolf, the Flexible, so he was the flexibility guy for ATG. Him and I collaborated together. So I started doing the coach's course. He was doing the programming kind of side to it that was attached to that platform. And that was an awesome experience. Jeff and I are still very close to this day. And we had similar journeys from like that gymnastic bodies through to like going through kit stuff and finding eminent, like him and I were on the same journey and sharing that with each other along the way. So like if you go through my old podcasts, it's actually like during that time when him and I were collaborating with ATG and Real Movement, there's quite a few episodes of Jeff and I talking about flexibility stuff. And we did the podcast together with Kit Lachlan and Emmett, of course. And then we did the Fellowship of the Range, like that. We were able to kind of, Emmett came in and this Fellowship of the Range thing kind of started. And yeah.
What was that?
It was just kind of us. We have a little chat going all the time where we kind of just talk about training and certain things we're seeing and stuff like that. And it was Emmett, like he kind of coined it, like Fellowship of the Range. It was funny. And then we did a few episodes like just kind of under that umbrella, but like originally having him on as a guest for a few episodes was like just trying to get Emmett on as a guest so we can talk about his side of training and his background and stuff, because it's like he's the wizard, right? So that was a cool relationship to kind of develop as well. Now it's like I can still connect with Emmett and Jeff on a regular basis this way. But yeah, Jeff and I I think I was actually just messaging him right before we started this podcast. Like we still talk about training and stuff every day. But that when ATG and Real Movement were trying to find that merge, that was when the range of strength stuff was kind of being shared on both sides. And Jeff was working on some programming stuff with me, and I was working on the coaches stuff with him. And we were like trying to figure out how that worked. And it wasn't really clearly laid out kind of over time for a while. And then when the ATG guys kind of split, like they're not connected like they were back then, that was kind of when everything started switching and changing and becoming more just Knees Over Toes guy and ATG. And range of strength was kind of like a byproduct of it. Like it was kind of like a second, I don't know, it was more of a second thought, like how do we just kind of make this kind of merge in? And that was when I just kind of decided, you know what, I'm just going to go do my own thing and, figure it out from there. Like just start coaching people and, using some of these systems and updating these systems and sharing some of the new ideas I had. And that's where we are now, where I have the membership set up and just doing my coaching kind of thing.
Could you tell me what your definition of mobility is?
I started reading a book recommended to me by Angus Bradley. Do you know Angus?
No.
He's a up and coming coach. He's dropping a lot of heat on social media, but I've
Oh,
had some back and forth discussion with him, and he recommended this book, Anti-Fragile. I don't know
yes,
if you
by
read
Taleb.
that. Yeah. I've been getting into that recently, and I'm kind of feeling like that is a better definition of flexibility than maybe like just the dictionary term. Anti-fragile, the ability to actually put yourself among stressors and um, just kind of not have that fragile kind of mentality, but we're developing movement capacities to a degree where we are anti-fragile, like we can withstand whatever comes our way. And that's really like flexibility to me, is like your degrees of freedom, your flexibility reserve, like for the scenario where things aren't perfect, because life doesn't move in a perfect line, in a perfect, neutral spine or whatever. And however many research papers you got to present so people understand that that's just our bodies adapt and we shape and we mold and we figure things out kind of our own way. That's all subjective to the degrees of freedom you have at your joints, and your muscles and your connective tissue. And the more that we have, or the best to the ability that we can create that, I mean, the more options we're going to have to move freely and do the things that we want to do. And I think that's probably the best way to think about flexibility. Like, flexibility is everything to me now. Strength training is flexibility, like a squat. That's a demonstration of flexibility. Like, it's not this like passive endeavor where it's still often thought to be. It's like, no, everything is flexibility, because you wouldn't be able to do any of that if you didn't have a certain degree of flexibility. And you can do that better when you have good flexibility. So I think that I'm starting to think about anti-fragile now as like, you know, maybe the better way to get that message out. But even range of strength is, in saying range of strength, it kind of connects with people more. It's like, I mean, the more strength you have in your range, the more degrees of freedom you have, and the more flexibility you have, the more, ability you have to overcome the scenarios that you may be put thrust upon. So I think that's a good way to think about it. And if we start thinking about it more that way, it becomes more of a priority for people, because they can see that it's not just the splits, right? It's not just a feat, but rather, the reserve that we have, worst case scenario, or whatever it is that we want to do, to be able to do that and to do it well and without fatigue, kind of all those things.
That being said, do you only ever train those capacities, strength and flexibility, collect together, or is there a place where you would train things separately?
Yeah, definitely. And that's kind of when you get into the thought process of like hard style flexibility work versus like soft style yoga, or, it doesn't have to be yoga, but more relaxed stretching, and the importance of what that can do for your, rest and digest, your nervous system. You can find reasons to do that. A lot of people maybe struggle with finding why it is that they need to do that, and everything's kind of like go go go, and I want to have it all in one place, one stop, so that I can have freedom to go do other things. But my practice definitely is a combination of the two. It always has been. And just trying to figure out um, where that fits from day to day. But those soft style relaxed flexibility sessions are separated from this more updated or upgraded thought of training strength and flexibility together. You don't have to, like, the thought process, I guess, there too, is that you don't have to train flexibility hard every day. Like, that's not necessarily what I'm saying, because a lot of people get caught up in that too. Like, I got to stretch every day, and if I'm going to get flexible, I got to go super hard. It's like, no. When you see it through the lens of strength training, you can put the same kind of effort forward that you would do with progressing a barbell squat. You need time to rest and recover from tissue adaptations and those kind of things. But the cool thing about flexibility is it does offer that second piece, which nothing else does, right? It's like that meditative sort of relaxed style approach where we can just kind of put ourselves in this scenario where we can recover better, or we can actually channel in our parasympathetic nervous system. So I think that's where flexibility becomes more dynamic for us, is where we have the option to view it through the lens of strength training, but then view it through the lens of relaxed style stretching. And because that's also a message kind of getting shared too, is like, you don't have to stretch and you don't have to do this relaxed kind of BS. And it's like, well, it's all good. It's just, you know, where it's put and why you use it and what you use it for, kind of what's the goal. So yeah, like I definitely still like to have the practice set up in that way where they're a little bit separated. And some people respond at different stages in their flexibility journey to having it separated more, depending on what their goals are. So I just even had a conversation with a client last week where they're kind of getting past those newbie stages where you can get the buy-in from a lot of the weighted mobility stuff, and you know, you can have the static stretching there, and it's kind of like things start to halter. You're not seeing as much progress. It's like, okay, well, now we need to make a little bit of a switch and prioritize some of the longer stretching stuff, and allow the body to kind of settle into these new ranges and allow adaptations to occur in a different way. Which is like we talked about earlier in the podcast, some people kind of get to that stage and say, nah, just kind of go back to, I'm feeling good enough. I don't need to, you know, go that hard into it or go that deep with it. So it's one of those things.
The loaded mobility is the sexiest of all, undoubtedly. Yeah. Talking back about Jefferson curls and skin in the cat, and you know, I looked at your Instagram this morning. You had some Cossack squats, or barbell Cossack squats on there. I know I've gotten myself into trouble as a coach before with online programming, where we put out some stuff around some standards around loaded Cossacks, and sort of setting a bit of a target, saying like, you know, this is where you be it as a beginner, here's intermediate. And then, you know, if you're a real savage, you could throw whatever half of your body weight on and perform, you know, 16 alternating reps. And I had a bunch of people sending me videos of them performing horrendous repetitions with, you know, way too much weight on their back. And it's like, fuck you. With the power of, hey, this thing used at the right time, used responsibly, can produce great results. However, it can also produce great injury. How do you manage that as a coach and as someone who's, you know, predominantly online? What's your process there?
Yeah, that's the hardest part for online training, is like giving incentive to work towards things without hurting a lot of people, right? It's the accessibility of programming now, where it's, you know, I can do custom programming, but some people, they just want a template. And then, you know, you look at that template and you got to try to cover all bases on this template of a perfect avatar. I've started creating these milestones. So I just call it the milestones system for range of strength now. So you come in and there's like 12 basics. There's 12 graduate milestones, 12 feats of range. Like if you go harder, you want to go deeper with it. And the milestones, maybe even it's just the term of milestones versus standard. It's just kind of like, these are milestones that you can reach. And here's like different levels. And I think you get that wording right, where it's like, you kind of want to be, if there's 12 of them, hitting like 7 or 8 to feel like you can kind of move into like certain other areas and work on things. I think that's kind of more the way you want to talk to a global kind of population of people about these things is, hey, if you are chasing really big numbers here, make sure it's kind of balanced out with some kind of intensity in this movement, or make sure you can kind of hit at least 6 of these pretty good or feel comfortable with them before loading up a bodyweight Jefferson curl. Right. So flexibility standards are a lot harder to identify as well, because like you said, like the weighted mobility stuff's the sexy stuff, but it's not your entry point. Like it's not your entry point stuff. So the basics milestones I've laid out are more flexibility based, like traditionally, like you should be able to palm the floor pike or be pretty comfortable with a fold before we start going super heavy on a Jefferson curl. Like, I mean, people need to have those kind of things laid out, kind of expectations set for them so that, yeah, the sexy stuff doesn't become your entry point or something that, you know, you feel like you're capable of. It's like flexibility standards haven't been identified enough, at least entry level ones for people to kind of know is like, yeah, you should be able to put your arms up straight, touch the wall, like before we kind of get into these crazy heavy cross bench pullovers or those kind of things. So I think that's where coaches want to look to setting standards online. Just have a movement assessment in place where people feel like they can at least, can you do 8 of these like comfortably? It's like, okay, well, you can use this intensity, like level 1, 2, and 3 kind of approach, so that at least you can tier things a little bit better. If you're working it with like people that are running templates, I think that's the language you want to get into more now, where it's like, you know, level 3, whatever is really sexy and crazy, but you're not ready for that yet because you haven't kind of hit this entry level point milestone where you got to put a little more work in. So, I mean, that's all. I think flexibility training hasn't made those connections yet between that weighted mobility kind of stuff versus like entry point stuff. Hasn't been laid out as clearly enough for people.
It's arguably a harder job, isn't it, from a coach, from a programming perspective, because strength is it is in a sense quite linear. Could you perform X amount of reps at X amount of weight, or right, you know, whichever variation, versus qualities or perhaps levels of comfort or, you know, capacity within positions to express. Flexibility is it's very nuanced, and I think that I think in part that's why a lot of coaches just almost don't fuck with it, because it's because in a sense strength is easier to coach. Like going back to the powerlifting example, not to say that powerlifting programming is in any way easy, though it is simple in the desired outcomes.
Yeah, and I think that's where you kind of have to create those desired outcomes. That's what people need to see with flexibility, is like, you can't just say, can you touch your toes? It's rather, can you touch your toes comfortably for 30, maybe 60 seconds and breathe and understand what's happening? And then that's a whole different story, right? Because people reach for their toes, they're like, oh, I touched my toes. It's like, no, man, I want you to hang out down there in this lengthened position. And that's when the game changes. A coach stretch is another good example. Like, people hammer their back. Oh, I can do a coach stretch. No, can you position your pelvis this way and breathe comfortably and hold this for 60 seconds? It's like, oh, no, I can't. So those targets or kind of clearly laid out objectives, like they haven't been laid out enough for people to understand them as they do to, like, can you bench 2 plates aside or whatever? It's like, not stretching is kind of the same if you put those guidelines there. It's like, not just stretch your hamstring, but can you hold this position in shape, breathe comfortably for this amount of time, measuring the degree of range that they currently have and comparing that to like where they should be. And there could be a better job done maybe in the research to show, outside of like the basic norms of joint movement, you know, like flexibility, like what happens when you take someone on this kind of flexibility journey and those norms of range of motion that you're kind of looking for to set some targets. I think that's where a lot of people need to see, because knowing that you need 90 degrees of hip flexion, you know, is like an important normal trait of a human being. versus the in between of that is like a front split. So it's like, oh, I got 90 degrees hip flexion, but I want to do a front split. Like, where are the steps between that? And like, how are, like people don't have that laid out as clearly for them as they should.
Could you talk on sort of further to that point, what the main mistakes you see people who are setting out early on this journey making? I'm guessing, people who are seeing range of strength stuff, people who are saying, okay, I got to get into deeper, better positions. I can use a bit of weight. I can incorporate a bit of that. Yep, Jefferson curls, I'm on it. Where do you see people going wrong most commonly?
Just going too hard, right? Because the reverse effect can happen, and pushing yourself into new ranges or getting into loaded mobility type work is the same as strength training. And you can just overload the system and thrash yourself way too hard, way too soon. And this is where we need to talk about programming, right? So like, how do you actually lay out a 12-week block of flexibility training programming where progression makes sense, or there's some kind of rules of thumb there that they're following so they don't overdo it too soon. They know when there has to be a period of accumulation versus intensity, and setting those expectations. Like the first 3 weeks, you're just figuring out what the workouts are and like just learning to be there. The second 3 weeks, you're doing that in stride. So you're showing up and you're confident in what you're doing. And then having some kind of scale of intensity or some kind of framework of like threshold type work is very important, because holding a stretch is one thing. Then applying contractions in a stretch is another thing. And then actually adding intensity to that stretch is like the third thing. So it's kind of ensuring that all of those things are laid out for the individual to better understand. And that's what I've really been trying to lay out more clearly on like my programs and my membership, is like those educational pieces where we're not just doing a program and thinking like, I'm going to get flexible. It's like a totally different journey. It's like we're doing the program, but trying to understand how we're going to get flexible. Like, how am I going to stretch? How am I going to make this stretch more intense? How does the workout become more intense? And how do I use these other components like strength training or loading a stretch to my own advantage, where it's actually going to progress and I'm actually going to see some progress. So the biggest mistake most people make is they train too hard. They just go too hard with it because they want something about that range of motion, right? I want that range, so I'm going to force it. And the best way to think about it is a new range of motion or a new space to be in is like a new 1 rep max on your squat. So you can't do that all the time. Like, you got to learn to get into that space, get strong in that space. And then you got to do that constantly. Like, you got to constantly work at it's not going to be there the next time. And that's always the question, is like, why aren't I was here before, but now it's taking me a little longer to get there, or, it's just a different process for people to understand. And always connecting it to what you already know is important. And that's what worked for me, is, connecting what I already knew with powerlifting or strength training, and with that kind of thought process of periodizing and kind of allowing things to adapt over time. And that's where you can have more success with it.
Do you see strength training as in a more typical sense, lifting weights, gymnastic strength training type stuff? Do you see that as always playing a part in someone who is trying to become more flexible? Or might it not, say, for someone who already has a lot of strength training experience, like the powerlifter, but has, is lacking flexibility?
Yeah, I think it will, because you don't want to merge yourself into a new range of movement without strength. Like, and when you get there the first couple of times, it should be done passively, like for the most part. When we think about end range strength training, like a static stretch, learning to get into a new end range through like static stretching is actually the end range strength training that we're looking for. at those end range or starting points, not a heavy Jefferson curl, right? So you think about, now I'm educating someone that this is actually end range strength training, not a big loaded incline dislocate or something. And kind of building off of that into strength. You're always going to want strength. So whenever we create a new range of movement and it's going to be done more passively at the start, now we want to find a way to get into that space and make it strong. So we got to get into that space more frequently. And we got to spend more time under tension in that space, contracting. We got to maybe think about adding load. Strength is always going to be like the piece to maintaining or actually owning your flexibility. And, you know, you get the same thing will happen on the opposite end where someone's already really flexible and they're having issues and they don't have the strength piece. Everything's kind of passive tissue, and they haven't made those connections yet to, like, you know, how to actually use this range of motion that I have so much access to. So I think really it's all strength. And that's what flexibility is like that reserve that you have is like a reserve that you can, you know, produce within strength. But I don't see the two ever being separated. Like, they should always be together. And that's, I think, the missing piece.
That's a really nice way to frame it. I like what you said there. The strength training is what allows you to own your flexibility, to make those positions permanent and to consolidate them.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating criticism that you often hear from the S&C realm about, you know, when you see this stuff, usually on social media, more kind of strength heavy coaches who cite studies showing that flexibility training is only produces short-term results.
Mm-hmm.
And that in some way makes it not worth doing, which I find interesting because, in fact, all training is a short-term result. Like, you know, you could do some bicep curls today. It's not going to, you know, your biceps won't be jacked forever.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about that sort of, I guess I would say it's a common misconception, particularly from the strength and conditioning convention.
Yeah. And I think if you're going to, you know, have the podcast now where we're talking a lot about flexibility, we got to bring Dan Van Zandt, flexibility research, into the picture, because he's been a mentor of mine, more on the educational side the last few years. And he really brings all research to the forefront. Like, if you're in flexibility training as a coach and you're trying to present this to people who may be argumentative, like, he's a guy you need to have on your side because he presents the research. And a lot of this research that gets, again, people will pull research that, you know, abides by their bias, is like, no, look, this research paper said this. And it's like, there's so much more research that has said the opposite. And a lot of that research that says that flexibility is like a temporary, or, you know, stretching is just like a temporary kind of thing. Again, yeah, it's not like the study itself, it hasn't been conducted in a long enough period of time to actually validate if that's a long-term result. The degree of elasticity or whatever they found that it affected of power output, it's like, when that gets blown out of proportion and you go back and look at the study and realize that it's like 0.0 of a third or 0.00, right? Like, it's the degree of which they're blowing this out of proportion to, like, does that really going to affect the general population, or is it going to affect an elite sprinter, which it doesn't even really affect them to this high degree that everyone's blowing it up to be. Yeah, like I think you really just got to look for where people have done the work themselves. And that's always where I go, is I try to find the mentors that have made people flexible and, like, know how to do that, then find the research to kind of back up that stuff. Because that's often the opposite of what you see happening is everyone's always throwing the research out there and the evidence kind of work. And it's like, okay, well, we know this works and this person has done this with thousands of people. Where does the research say that this actually, what they're doing is working and it's validated? And we need guys like Dan that can bring that to the forefront. And that's what he's doing. We did a podcast together where we dispelled, like he came in and he dispelled like the 4 most common myths in flexibility, and being a short-term effect was one of them, and that it affects your power output, like these common ones that you see, and it's just not true. And if there is a result to like a certain degree, it's not enough to like validate that that's something that is worth considering as like a deficit or something that is going to affect everybody. Again, we're talking about now a general population of people that don't even really exercise or are sedentary. Is like static stretching going to matter if they do it in the warm-up? Or you know what I mean? Like that's kind of how you have to start thinking about that practical side of it and how that's going to help you help more people.
Yeah, I've always thought that, and even I got to check out Van Zandt's work because I've never been particularly up on the studies, but the example I've always used is okay. Let's say that static stretching before your workout does reduce your maximal power output by whatever, 1%. Or a few percent. But let's say that you're so fucking tight that you can only express 50% of your potential hip mobility. Well, you're not going to be able to express anywhere near what your maximal power output anyway is, because your hips don't move. So if we stretch, why don't we take that 1% loss in order for maybe a 40% gain in opening up your hips kind of thing. For me, it's just, and of course, maybe things could change if you're talking about the absolute elite level who are hyper specialized and, that kind of thing. But for pretty much everyone that I work with, and I'm sure it's the same for you more or less, stretching is highly relevant. And and I've really come around more so in recent years to just stretch before you train so that you can get into better positions and have a better training session.
Yep. And even those people, when you think about high level elite athletes, like for the most part, they demonstrate a lot of the prerequisite ranges of movement that they need for that sport. So it's, we're not looking at this person and saying, oh, they're inflexible. They have flexibility for the most part. Like a lot of these times, and that's what you need to look at too, is like, everybody needs flexibility, but if you already have it, you need to know how to identify that and what that person needs. So we can maintain their flexibility. They just need to strength train, and strength training is flexibility training. They're still doing flexibility. Like those 4 components of flexibility training: active, static active, and static passive, and dynamic active and dynamic passive. That covers everything in the fitness industry. Every single type of fitness is covered under those 4 types of flexibility. So to erase flexibility is just, it's everything. So it's just, what type of flexibility do you need more of? Do you need more passive static? Probably, because you're so bound up and tight you can't even strength train. Do you need more dynamic active because you already have a lot of these positions and ranges? Yeah. And that's really, I think coaches can do a better job of just identifying that. What type of flexibility does this person need? And kind of go on from there rather than trying to erase it.
Lucas, man, I've enjoyed the shit out of this conversation.
Yeah, me too.
I appreciate you making the time, and I love your work. I love what you do. I follow your Instagram. I love your music choice. You put some Led Zeppelin on with the Cossacks. I was like, that's fucking cool. There's a lot of nuance there to marketing and to what people put out, and I like your nuance. I wanted to let you know of that.
Appreciate it.
Can you plug your stuff? Tell people where they can find your program, where they can join the Range of Strength community, etc.
Range of Strength on Instagram, rangeofstrength.ca, Canadian kind of sign off. That's where you'll find all the information about working with me either on the membership where you get programming access and direct contact with me, or customization programming where we can do like some assessment based work. Yeah, I try to keep it simple. I don't want to have too many. I have a YouTube channel and a podcast, and you can get into a lot of the content and stuff obviously for free at those levels. And on my Instagram, I'm never withholding information. I'm trying to share it so people can kind of make choices for themselves. As all the mentors I've worked under kind of do that. And I think that's important, is, just sharing what you know and how you think you can help people, and kind of letting them make those choices themselves. But those are the main platforms to find my stuff.
Mate, that's awesome. I strongly agree with just putting your stuff out there. There's, of course, it can seem like you're giving your stuff away for free when you kind of want people to pay for it because that's your business. But at the end of the day, the people that really want to get close to you will come and buy your stuff and join your site. And then the people that are maybe just more on the fringes and maybe they're not ready to buy yet, but helping them is essentially what you're trying to do, isn't it? So I think people think they shoot themselves in the foot by putting the good content out there, but in fact, it just works in the opposite way.
Yeah, and people can make their own choices, and most people don't know what to do with a lot of the things you put out anyway. It's like they need a coach. So just keep sharing your stuff so that they can make those choices as to like what kind of coach they need, right? But yeah, that's a good message, I think, for people listening that maybe are coaches and into that kind of stuff for themselves. Because yeah, you don't want to get into that world where you're afraid to share stuff, because that's a hard go if that's how you're doing business.
Mate, thank you. I want you to stick around because I'd like to just have a little wrap up once we stop recording on this. Sure. But guys, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the chat today with Lucas Aaron. Go follow his stuff, check it out. It is really cool, and it's good to support people out there who are carving their own path, doing the thing, and spreading the good word within the fitness realm. Because as you know, there's a lot of bullshit out there, and so the people that cut through that are the people that should get the attention. If you want any help from us, you can get us at junglebrothers.com. And if you like the episode, please share it with a friend, subscribe to the show, just help to share the word, because that will support what we do and continue to bring on more epic guests like Lucas. Thank you guys for listening. We'll catch you next week. Peace.